Yo, let's go. What's up, y'all? Tonight, we're going to be covering Alexander Solzhenitsyn's One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Okay, this is the seminal 1962 novel, Russian novel. And it's a pretty short novel. And today, we're going to be going through the novel. As usual, we're going to be going through the text. We're going to look at the actual text. We're going to look at the actual words on the page to see what this book has to say. This is a different one. This is especially a different one for me. Steven says this is the last book that I read in one sitting. I did it at the Taco Bell near me. um, no, it's a short novel, and like I was saying, it's a little bit different of a novel for me because I hadn't read this one before. I'd actually never read this book, and I decided to pick it up. I read Solzhenitsyn before. I actually can't find my copy of the Gulag Archipelago that I read 22 years ago. Big red hardback copy of it. I'm missing half of my books, half of my prose books. Um, and I've said that before in the other streams, you guys. But this one's a little bit different because we've gone through we've done Dostoevsky. We did Dostoevsky Notes from the Underground. We did The Underground Man with beautiful Tristana over at Primal Edge Health. But this is slightly different. This is a totally modern novel, and this one's crazy, y'all. Because I hadn't read this one before. I had read Solzhenitsyn. I haven't read Cancer Ward, but I have read the Gulag Archipelago, but I hadn't read this book. And so it was an interesting read. You can do this in one sitting. This is a great book. And it's a great book for a number of reasons, not only because of the historical aspects, which we'll dive into, but simply because of the narrative. And we're going to look at some of what makes up this book and why it's an important book. I think that as far as my sort of thesis goes for this book, I would say that this is a great book for a couple of reasons. One, because it's terse. It's sort of a Spartan book. It's terse. My chair here is squeaking, so forgive me. And it's straightforward. It's a third person narrative, and it's really good. I'd say that it's not what I would expect it to be. You know, the book takes place in a gulag in the 1950s. They're in a Russian prison camp in Kazakhstan, and you would expect the book to be miserable and miserable, sad, and an indictment of the Gulag system and of the totalitarian Soviet system. It is those things, but that's sort of what the reader can. That's what we read into it. The book itself is not the first couple of things at all. In fact, that's one of the major points of the book is that it is straightforward. It's straightforward. It's clearly written, and the details in the book are pretty amazing, pretty astounding. Obviously, the state hated this book. So let's sort of just begin with just a deep dive into this. And shouts out to everybody who has joined me tonight in the live stream. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for sharing the stream. We're up to over 520 subs now. So we've gotten that. We hit 100, and now we hit 500, and next stop 1,000, and we are almost at 10,000 views on this channel, which is amazing. I can't believe it. So thank you to everybody who's been watching, and everybody who's been a part of this. It's been fun, and if you want to support me, please see the links that my wonderful mods will drop in the chat throughout, and that are in the channel description. The PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo links are all in there. So thank you to everybody who supported me. And I want to give a shout out before I begin, of course, to my sister who is a big supporter of me. She knows about the channel now, and she supported me big time. So thank you to my sister out there. I really appreciate you. I love you. My actual sister. I'm not talking about all my homies, my brothers, and my sisters out there. I'm talking about my actual sisters. So thank you. And thank you to everybody who supported me. And thank you to Kristen, TGF, Jeff, OK, all of my homies out there. You guys, also, if you're not subscribed to Kristen's channel at Slowboy Whiteboard, you got to get over there. I mean, she's just banging out the content. She's got such great content, and I really enjoy it. Also, you should check out, of course, our homie Jerry at Exposing Powerful Lies live streams. Go to his stream from last night, which was awesome. We had tons of based Star Child, Indigo Child, Starseed, Ascension Wizard videos. So you got to check it out. And also check out our homie Jerry, who's an amazing musician, and some of his ukulele rocking. Right. Thank you. Also, yeah, Lil Raspy Live. Thank you to everybody who supported us. Thank you to Ellie, ADH, everybody, Based Mom, everybody who supported us. We love you. So I love you. So yeah, we're definitely gonna have a 1K sub stream, and I think that the next stream will probably be our fun stream, because we're going to hit 1,000 views. That's sort of been my marker. Once we hit, 10,000 views. Once we hit 10,000 views, because we're over 500 subs now. And before we get into Solzhenitsyn, also the next literary analysis stream, usually I don't decide beforehand, but the next stream is going TGF sent PayPal. Let's check it out. The next stream, I don't announce it beforehand because I don't decide until the last minute. But the next stream is going to be we're going to do something totally different, and that's going to be something completely contemporary, and that'll be Bret Easton Ellis's Lunar Park. This is a great book. Now Bret Easton Ellis from American Psycho and Less Than Zero, but we're not going to do. Oh, sweet! Shouts out to our homie TGF, the Green Feathers, Nick. I love you. Appreciate you, homeboy. He donates $10 on PayPal. I love you. Thank you so much, homie. Really appreciate you for all the support you've given me. Yeah. So the next one we're going to do, like I said, is Bret Easton Ellis's Lunar Park. This is a great book. It's a meta book. It's a meta narrative, and I thought it would be good because it's something totally contemporary and deals with sort of DID, Hollywood, the demonic, and is kind of a indictment of modern culture, right? So let's see. Oh, Derek, thank you, Derek. Derek donates $10 on PayPal. Thank you so much, homie, for the support. I really appreciate you. Yo, thank you to everybody out there who's supporting me. Yo, yeah, let it roll in. Yeah, let it roll in. Pay Piggy. That's not my song, so I'm not going to try it. But yeah, go to the Pay Piggy song. Go to Instagram and go to West Lexicon Media, who I did an interview with. He had me on for an interview from Alternate Current Radio, ACR. Our friend West Lexicon Media, and he did a great edit of Jay's Pay Piggy song. So yeah, check that out. All right, so let's dive into Solzhenitsyn and One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. The book was published in 1962, and I'm reading I think this is the third translator of the book. There were two initial translations. So the book was, again, published in 62, and it was immediately, it was actually celebrated by the Soviets. Khrushchev let this book get published, and they sort of turned that around, and then they tried to suppress it. Khrushchev, it actually talks about that, and Khrushchev's adoption of the publication of this book in one of his biographies. I have this one, Khrushchev, the Man in His Era. This is a pretty good biography of Khrushchev. And the reason he did that was because remember when Khrushchev did that wild speech right, where he was criticizing Stalin, and they sort of implemented this policy of anti-Stalinism and apologized for some of the terrible things in the past, right? Um, yeah, thank you, Jeff, for dropping that link to our homie over at ACR, who's got great edits. And check out ACR, by the way. Check out ACR and their YouTube page, because Hasher and all those guys are doing videos now. And we here, of course, know about ACR, Alternate Current Radio, because we followed them for years. We would watch Jay's interviews on the Boiler Room for years, and those are great. So, yeah, check that out. Check out our homie over there. And while you're at it, check out Jay at Jay's Analysis. Of course, we always say that because he's our big time homie, and he always shares our stuff. So we really appreciate that. So, yeah, initially the book was published, and then it was suppressed. Solzhenitsyn is an interesting character. He is a very Russian-looking dude, right? He was born in 1918, died in 2008. He was 89 years old. One thing I forgot to mention is I'm going to go into just my sort of off the top of my head knowledge about Solzhenitsyn and some of Soviet history. It's not really my place here during the stream to get into the geopolitical broader context. I don't feel confident enough to talk about that. I'm no expert, especially on Russian history. But we are going to talk about the literary history and the literary history of this book and about Solzhenitsyn. So the book was published in 1962. He went on to be heavily suppressed in the Soviet Union until he finally left. He was expelled from the country. And then he won the Nobel Prize in 1970, I think, but he couldn't collect the prize in person. Then he went into exile in Maine for a while. He ended up dying in Moscow in 2000. I remember when he died in 2008. There were a bunch of articles published about this huge figure in modern Russian literature. And Solzhenitsyn is a lot different from the greater the big sort of the bulk of the canon of modern literature. Number one, because he's Russian. We usually focus on everything we've done here is, Western literature. We've done everything from the Renaissance through the contemporary era. We haven't really done much anything foreign, but I thought it was important to do this because, number one, I thought I would do it because we did Dostoevsky and because this sort of is an extension of that in a way. But also, I thought I would do it just because of the world we live in now, everything that's happening, and the gulags, guys. They're going to put us in gulags. They're going to put us in FEMA Camp 322. They're going to put us in FEMA Camp 322 out there in Appalachian. So I can't really even do my AJ voice, even though my natural voice is a little raspy. Solzhenitsyn himself was in a gulag from, I think, 1945 to 1953, followed by 3 years of exile. He was in the gulag because at the tail end of World War II, his letters were read by Smersh, whom JD has talked about quite a bit, right? Smersh and the NKVD and then later the KGB for his sort of statements about Stalin. Thrown into the gulag, followed by 3 years of exile. And this book follows a guy named Ivan Denisovich Zhukov, right? You think of Zhukov, right? I actually was thinking about Zhukov today because of, if you've seen that, I really like that movie, The Death of Stalin. I think it's funny. And there's that scene, which is almost a meme, right? Where Zhukov comes in, right? Bam! Medals flying on his chest. Now, that doesn't really have anything to do with this novel. That is the name of the character. The book is written in the third person. And I'm just going to start by reading some of the introduction. I purposely didn't read any criticism of this book. I didn't want to read any literary criticism because I'm new to this book. I'm not new to Solzhenitsyn, but I'm new to this book. And I didn't want to muddy the waters sort of in my own brain this time with any literary criticism, because I feel like I don't know what this means, but like, because I felt like I don't know, I wanted to come at it fresh, right? I wanted to come at this with a sort of an authentic take on Solzhenitsyn. And I felt like if I read any literary criticism, I wasn't deep into it enough to be able to sort of decipher and comprehend that, especially in time for the stream. So I need a lot more time with Solzhenitsyn. So these are all my own views and takes. I'm sure they're probably common to a lot of what a lot of people are going to say in terms of their literary criticism of the book, because there are some obvious patterns and themes. But again, my sort of thesis, my thesis on this book is essentially that the speaker here is sort of a third person omniscient narrator in this world of the gulag, and that Solzhenitsyn does that purposefully because it creates sort of an objectivity, sort of a distance between himself and Ivan Denisovich or Sukov, and that gives us that the form and the content work together to produce meaning. The meaning here is that essentially that human beings are incredibly resilient, and they can withstand just about anything. And even though these guys are living in a sort of a hell on earth, in this sort of Dantean ninth circle frozen hell on earth in the gulag, it's the little things that get them by. It's the little things that make them live. And it really makes you take stock of the fact that we need very little for happiness, and we need very little to get by. All the rest of it is just trappings, in terms of the physical things, the things, right? The stuff that we buy, and the consumerism. And although they do concentrate in the book a lot on the concrete and the hard and the tactile things that make them feel like home, it's really the camaraderie, right? The camaraderie, the comradeship, the people, and the way that these characters are described that gives you that gives the characters life, and that give us life reading it. And we also realize that the sick, twisted, and insidious people that have put them there are really their attempts to crush the human spirit, right? And crush happiness and the will to live, a lot of times are misguided. They don't work. We can survive a lot. Now, that's not to say that, this is a happy state, but he has many passages on what he considers happiness and what makes them happy. And it's really inspiring. And a couple of the themes that I noticed in the book, I mean, obviously the idea of the cold is almost another character, right? It's almost an outside character because it affects them so much. And in fact, it's used by both the good guys and the bad guys within the life of the novel, or in real life, because they use the cold to their advantage, even though it's always trying to kill them. They can do things with the cold. They get out of things with the cold. But again, it's like this outside force, which represents also you would think that it kind of would represent the inner coldness of some of the characters, but these characters aren't really cold. They're warm. So that was an interesting juxtaposition, the warmth in the novel, the warmth of the characters to each other and to themselves. And it's Kristen. Yeah, Kristen, your phone blowing up. That's because you're popular, girl. And the other thing is the hunger and the cold, obviously, play together, work together in this. The hunger is an all-encompassing, pervasive fact of life in the novel. And it's what you would expect it to be going into it. And it's amazing that there can be that much of an emphasis in the book on the hunger and what it does to them. but it really drives them. It drives them to do things, and it also surprised me because I was expecting the usual, not sentimentality, but the usual like melodrama and overstatement on hunger and the fact that like these people are willing to do anything to satisfy their hunger, but it's not really like that in the book. In fact, these people are incredibly stoic and brave, and there's a clear dichotomy between how hunger affects certain people in the novel and what that means for their future and how that means the other characters know they will survive or not survive. So we're going to get into all that. I want to start off by talking about this is it says instead of a forward, and this is by let's see, Alexander Tardovsky, and then the translator of this one was the third trans was the third trans. Oh, Max Hayward. Max Hayward is the guy who translated this really third in line. And this particular book that I have is the let's see, this is the Bantam edition. So this is 1981. This is a 1981 Bantam edition. Of course, the book was first published in 1962, and the first let's see, the first Bantam edition was 1963. All right, so this says the subject matter of Alexander Solzhenitsyn's, and again, this is the extent of the literary criticism that I read. Of course, this isn't criticism; it's just a foreword. So it says the subject matter of Alexander Solzhenitsyn's novel is unusual in Soviet literature. It echoes the unhealthy phenomena in our life associated with the period of the personality cult, now exposed and rejected by the party. Of course, when this was written, the USSR was still extant, right? Although these events are so recent in point of time, they seem very remote to us. But whatever the past was like, we in the present must not be indifferent to it. Only by going into its consequences fully, courageously, and truthfully can we guarantee a complete and irrevocable break with all these things that cast a shadow over the past. This is what Nikita Khrushchev meant when he said in his memorable concluding address at the 22nd Congress, quote, "It is our duty to go carefully into all aspects of all matters connected with the abuse of power. In time, we must die, for we are all mortal. But as long as we go on working, we can and must clarify many things and tell the truth to the party and the people. This must be done to prevent such things from happening in the future." Now, did you expect a statement like that from Nikita Khrushchev? Probably not. I was very surprised actually reading about Khrushchev. What a wild character, very interesting character. I also just read a book my dad sent me about Castro when he spoke at the United Nations and Harlem, and then of course he met up with Khrushchev, and later Khrushchev and Castro got along pretty well. You know, they would party together, they would drink, and it's especially funny looking at the pictures of Castro next to Khrushchev, because Castro to Khrushchev is like Sam Hyde next to a manlet. He totally dominates him, but Khrushchev through he's talking about the personality cults, but Khrushchev himself had a personality cult. I mean, he was extremely strong-willed, right? And I've got an interesting story about Khrushchev, a personal story about Khrushchev that maybe I'll tell later. And anyway, so he said this again at the 22nd Congress of the Soviet state. And again, this was no, glasnost, right? This was no like 80s Gorbachev era, thawing. And in fact, it's ironic because after this, Solzhenitsyn continued to be suppressed, right, until he left Soviet Union. But what I find striking is not any of that, right? It's, of course, the parallels between now and then. The introduction just stated that even though this just happened in the life of the book, it's very recent to them. And I think that that's especially true because there are things that are happening now or that just happened, right? Big events that people have already, it's only been a couple years and people have already forgotten, right? It's only been, something could have happened this past weekend that people will have already forgotten, right? Or if if they realize that they have no idea, they just have no concept of the meaning. They have no, oh, that's awful. Oh, well, I'm going to go on to my grocery store where there's nothing on the shelf, right? Isn't it amazing that, if you grew up in the 80s, right? Um, we have this idea of the Soviet Union. Ooh, there goes the thunder. We have this idea of the Soviet Union that, oh, it's good we don't live in the Soviet Union because you'd have to go to the store and, buy all your toilet paper and, put it on a string and tie it around your neck and carry it home because you had to get everything you could. Um, you had to get everything you could then because it might not be there tomorrow. Well, obviously that's now here, right? Actually, I got that image from the book. Uh, that book by David Resnick about, if I don't know where that one is. It's a book about the fall of the Soviet Union. We ought to cover that one sometime. What's it called? It's called Lenin's. I don't know where it is. It's called Lenin's Tomb, and it's a book about the fall of the Soviet Union. That toilet paper image is one that I read. I remember reading in the book when from about a decade ago. Oh, that's a motorcycle out there, y'all. The Mad Max motorcycles are coming. They're going to escort me out to the acid rain district. But now you go to the grocery store, and we are in Soviet Russia. This is globalist small town America, right? Can't get your baby formula or whatever. He says, one day in the life of Ivan Denisovich is not a book of memoirs in the ordinary sense of the word. It does not consist merely of notes on the author's personal experiences and his memories of them, although only personal experience could have given the novel such an authentic quality. So true. It is a work of art, and it is the way in which the raw material is handled that gives it its outstanding value as a testimony and makes it an artistic document, possibility of which had hitherto seemed unlikely on the basis of concrete material. Now, what I thought about this essentially was that I couldn't help drawing comparisons between this book and other books about prison camps or accounts of prison camps or concentration camps. Notably, I kept thinking of Elie Wiesel's book Night, right, where of course, he's a child growing up in the, he's in Buchenwald and a couple other of the camps. But this book is so completely different than that, and for so many reasons. Obviously, not just the time and the place. It's a different era, right? This is post World War II. It's also, this is Russian. He's a grown man, but also just because of the tone, and because of the way in which the book is written. Now, I'm not criticizing that book. What I'm saying is that book has its own tone, and this book has a completely different one. This one is written straightforward and matter-of-factly. And in fact, one would think. So my impression of the book going into it before I read it was that this book was going to be really difficult to read in terms of its imagery and its accounts of life in the Gulag. Now, and that's partly because in Gulag Archipelago, there are extremely graphic accounts of the terrible things that happen, the TOR/TURE methods and the various, brutal inhumanities of the guards and, et cetera. But that book is thousands of pages compared to this book, which is a novel, which is like about 200 pages and really it doesn't have those things. And in fact, it's almost elliptical in nature, right? What I'm saying is like the fact that we're missing a lot of that adds to the weight of the book and its indictment of the system, because we also know that that censorship required that a lot of those passages remain outside of the purview of the speaker. It's okay. It's like my impression of this book and of the life of the book is like, I don't know. It's like this. The way that the characters are inside the barracks and are aware of this sort of ever-present lethality on the edges of their little world within the barracks in the guise of the guards, the snitches, and the cold and the hunger, right? Those are 4 completely lethal entities that exist in their life. And their life in this is truly, if the Gulag archipelago is the gulags are an archipelago, then the barracks are their little island. And the little island is their little life, right? It's their life. And the way that Zhukov gets through the book is clearly like on a rule of day to day. They live day to day. They are aware of their sentences. They're aware of time, but time is distorted so completely in this book that they can't think of time in its totality. They can't think of there are a number of passages about the time of day, what time of day it is, what season it is, what month it is, how long their sentence is. And over and over they state okay, if I have a 10-year sentence, I can't think of it as a 10-year sentence because it'll never come, right? The day of freedom will never come. They'll never be liberated from the camp. And in fact, they've seen a number of times where over and over there's a prisoner who reaches the end of his sentence and another 10-year sentence is tacked on completely arbitrarily, either bureaucratically or because of the guards or because of just any number of reasons. And the guy's there for another 10 years. So you can't ever think of that, right? They have no concept of time in that sense. And yet every single second of their day is taken up, right? They're never, that was another striking thing to me in this book, is that they are never, they're never like not doing something. They're never not concentrating on the task at hand or the work at hand. They're never still. They never get a second to rest. There's something every single second they are doing something. And it's not the kind of doing something that occurs in the book Night, where it's oh, a guard's going to come along and shoot him in the head. That's not the sort of thing they're worried about. And that sort of in a way adds to the strength of the book because it's more of an existential threat. It's more of a dread. And that's what sort of keeps them in line. Now, there are physical threats in the book. For instance, when there are these passages about when they get up in the morning and they finally go out to work and they have to go out and do labor on remember, Gulag is a labor camp. So they go out and they work on a battery station, and they work on a power station, and they work on railroads or something. But when they walk out there, his little gang, his little group, which is group 104, and there's 5 of them that have to walk together. And when they walk, they're walking in the snow, and it's minus 20 degrees or something. And they know that they have to walk in an orderly fashion, in a straight line with their arms behind their back. And if they go one step to the right or left, the guards have Tommy guns, and the guards will shoot them. They'll mow them down. And they know that will happen. That's not a threat. They know it absolutely will happen. And they're also told oh, they're not supposed to talk. And he says they always talk, especially when it's warm. They're always talking. But in the snow and the ice, they can't really talk that much because it's so cold. So on the one hand, the cold means, we were talking about the cold at the start. The cold means that they feel like they're going to freeze to death when they're out there. They're in very light clothes. It's minus 20 or whatever. They're walking in the snow. But at the same time, also the cold and the wind means that they can talk to each other without being overheard by the guards. So there's good things and bad things. It's hurting them, but it's also helping them. They, at the start of the book, they talk about when they get up, they look at the thermometer, and the thermometer, they're praying for the thermometer to say not minus 40, because if it says, can you imagine this, you guys? Minus 40. I mean, I know Base Mom can imagine this because she lives, she lives in this sort of, it's minus 40 right now where she lives. But I can't imagine minus 40 damn degrees. I can't imagine. I can barely imagine. I mean, I remember when it was 7 degrees here during the polar vortex, right? And that's too damn cold. That's too damn cold. Now, I like it cold, but I don't like it that cold. That's too much. But these guys, they're praying for it to be minus 40 because when it's that cold or when there's a blizzard outside, then they don't have to go to work. And that's another crazy thing. Don't have to go to work. You're like, dude, I thought in the gulag, they're at work 24/7 all day, every day, right? And it's slave labor. Well, it's actually not like that. I'm not saying it's better than that. I'm just saying it's not what I expected. Another thing was, they have Sundays off. I did not expect that. The other thing, the big shock in the book is that the guards actually really they don't appear, they didn't seem to me to appear that much. It's actually, the camp is actually mainly run by themselves, and they certainly keep themselves in line. And the reason they keep themselves in line is because this is actually pretty diabolical, but brilliant in terms of the planners of these gulags, and the people that planned it, the people that run the gulags started in 1919, and they continue until now, I guess. Not in the same sense that they were, but one thing that happens is, remember, if you've seen, Schindler's List or you've read Night, it's like if one person like doesn't pull their weight or doesn't or gets out of line, then the guards will shoot them or whatever, right? But in this, it's different. They don't have to do that because the MO is labor. They actually are building things and they want labor. They want the gulag labor there, right? So it actually falls in line to the other prisoners to keep themselves in line because dog's barking. Hold on. Because if the prisoners don't complete their task or something doesn't get done, then nobody in the squad, nobody in their gang will eat, right? They won't eat and they won't have warmth. So it's incumbent upon them to keep each one in line. And there are a series of scenes where somebody in their gang will be beaten by another prisoner because they're telling them, and they're like, work, you mutt. Because if they don't work, then none of them will eat and they all suffer. So they have this teamwork, which is enforced brutally, but they have to get it done because they have to eat. And then there are other scenes where it's discussing Zhukov, and it's like, he remembers back to like when he was a boy and he fed like groats to his horse, by the handful. And he's like imagining what that was like and how he would die for just like some of that food. And yet then he also says a man can live on nothing because he himself has lived on nothing for 8 years. Right. And he says there's a dude there who's been there for 25 years. And he says he's been there for 8 years and he can't imagine he's made it. And then another guy made it for like another 10 years, but he don't know how he can make it. But then the guy who's been there for 25 years, how in the world would you ever make it? And yet these people have they're almost blissful, right? Because they made it for so long. Give me a second here. I'll be right back. I'm going to keep the dog. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, y'all. All right, so this says, in Solzhenitsyn, the reader will not find an exhaustive account of that historical period, marked in particular by the year 1937. So bitter in all our memories. The theme of one day is inevitably limited by the time and place of the action and by the boundaries of the world to which the hero is confined. One day of Ivan Denisovich Zhukov, a prisoner in a forced labor camp, is described by Solzhenitsyn, unfolds as a picture of exceptional vividness and truthfulness about the nature of man. It is this, above all, that gives the work its unique impact. The reader could easily imagine many of the people shown here in these tragic circumstances as fighting at the front or working on post-war reconstruction. They are the same sort of people, but they have been exposed by fate to a cruel ordeal, not only physical, but moral. Not by fate. They haven't been exposed by fate. They've been exposed. They haven't been put there by fate. They've been put there by these demons, right? They've been put there by these people inspired, certainly demonic, but they've also been put there by these actual people. The author of this novel does not go out of his way to emphasize the arbitrary brutality which was a consequence of the breakdown of Soviet legality. All right, did you get that? He doesn't go out of his way to emphasize any of the brutal aspects, and he doesn't go out of his way to emphasize the nature of why they've been put there in the first place, or to even talk about Stalinism or their system. I mean, he really doesn't do that much. In fact, I remember reading that Solzhenitsyn said that in the Gulag, like when he was there when Stalin died, and the prisoners wept, right? It has taken a very ordinary day from reveille to lights out in the life of a prisoner. But this ordinary day cannot fail to fill the reader's heart with bitterness and pain at the fate of these people, who come to life before his eyes and seem to close to him in the pages of this book. The author's greatest achievement, however, is that this bitterness and pain do not convey a feeling of utter despair. On the contrary, the effect of this novel, which is so unusual for its honesty and harrowing truth, is to unburden our minds of things thus far unspoken, which had to be said. It thereby strengthens and ennobles us. That's so true. I didn't get the feeling of despair at all when reading this book, which is one of the ironies, but I think speaks to the strength of the narrative itself. He's not sentimental. He doesn't focus on abstract details. He doesn't focus on emotion because there's no time for that in the life of the characters within the book. One thing that I also noticed in terms of the construction of the book is that it's written in a terse diction. It's the sentences are quite short, and the words are almost solely monosyllabic, right? They're short, simple words, simple sentences, simple words. And the reason for that is because, number one, there's no like emotional message that he's trying to convey. Everything that we get from the book is straightforward, matter of fact, and we can infer the details. And also because there's a practical reason for that, and that's that the characters within the book exist in a place where it is freezing cold and they are hungry. They don't have the energy to waste on long words and sentences and sentimentality. Their life is focused on that moment and surviving and just the day-to-day stuff. Think about it. Like that plays into language itself. That's the reason why, for instance, we develop. It's one of the reasons why we develop dialect and different accents and vernacular, right? Because, like, for instance, in the South, people tend to speak a lot slower like this because it's languid in the warmth of the summer, in the heat of the summer, right? It's long, right? There's time. You can't. There's like you have all the time in the world, but in the North, right, in the cold of like a New Jersey or a New York wintertime, where there's a New York minute, it's so freezing cold that you have to go quickly from one place to another, and you don't have time to waste on like saying hello to somebody in another car. I'm walking here, right? Shouts out to my sister who's in the chat now. So let's begin. The book begins. Reveille was sounded, as always, at 5 a.m. A hammer pounding on a rail outside Camp HQ. The ringing noise came faintly on and off through the window panes covered with ice more than an inch thick and died away fast. It was cold, and the water didn't feel like going on banging. The sound stopped, and it was pitch black on the other side of the window, just like in the middle of the night when Zhukov had to get them up to go to the latrine Only now 3 yellow beams fell on the window from 2 lights on the perimeter and 1 inside the camp. He didn't know why, but nobody had come to open up the barracks, and you couldn't hear the orderlies hoisting the latrine tank on the poles to carry it out. That's the opening of the book. Now, what does that mean? It means that the book begins with reveille, right? They are waking up. The day begins, and it's truly life beginning in the life of the camp, in the life of the speaker. And that has a greater metaphysical meaning, because it means that he survived another day, right? He's made it another day. We don't have any focus on the day before. We don't have any thoughts on the day before. We only have it on right now, right? And also, he says, as always, though, at 5 a.m. So we know that there's a routine. There's a hammer pounding. We kind of infer the hammer and the sickle, right? But there's a hammer pounding on a rail outside the camp, which means that that's a concrete detail, a concrete image, which is showing us that their life is going to consist of hard labor, right? The window panes are covered with ice, and it's an inch thick, so we know exactly where we are. It died away fast. It's no accident that he uses the word death, right, in the very beginning of this narrative. So we already have an emphasis on death, but it's a faint emphasis. We don't have an overemphasis on death. He doesn't give us anything sentimental. Oh, I've lived another day. Oh, am I going to live today? Oh, people have died. Let's check how many people have died. He doesn't do any of that. It's simply reveille happened. We heard a noise. It was on the railway. We're going to have to get up and do our work, right? And it's pitch black outside. And then the emphasis, of course, on the latrines means that we are in a low world. We're in a base world. Not a base world. We're in a base world. We're not in a based world. We're in a base, low, sort of gnashing of teeth hell world, and they're just trying to get by, right? And it's the concrete physical details and the bodily functions that he's focusing on, but not so much that it's crass, because one of the other themes of the book is what makes a man, right? What constitutes a man? How does a man, how can people degenerate into animals in this world, or how can they live? How can they live like men? And so then we get a number of details about what they do when they get up. And one of those things is warming their boots. And again, this was sort of striking to me. This was shocking because I imagine that they would get up and they'd put on, prison uniforms, and they would just be sent out in the cold. Of course, if that happened, it wouldn't make sense because they wouldn't be able to work. It's so cold, they couldn't just go out in cold boots. So they've made sure that they have this life where somebody takes care to collect all the boots. They all have numbers in them, so they know what number is supposed to be theirs, even though he says they get mixed up, whatever. Somebody warms the boots beside a stove all night. And so they put on warm boots. So that gives them humanity. They're not completely miserable. They do what they can to get up and to get on with it in as comfortable a way as possible. Let's see. On page 14, it says, Zhukov quickly finished up the job. He goes to work for one of the warders. There's work. He says, there's work and work. It's like the two ends of a stick. If you're working for human beings, then do a real job of it. But if you work for dopes, then you just go through the motions. Otherwise, they'd have all kicked the bucket long ago. That was for sure. So I thought that was pretty funny because, we can all relate to that, right? In our, if you're working a wage slave or any job, or if you were in school and you had to do sports or you had to run, or, it's like what do they say in the military? Like, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, which is essentially when he goes to mop the floor for these guys, if they are human beings and he wants to work for them, right, or they reward him, or they're nice, and a lot of them end up being nice, especially the guys who in the book who you think are going to be the most vicious and the most dangerous in the book because they look that way, are actually the kindest, because they know how to get by in the system and they know how to treat other people, especially because they know that they'll be treated back in a certain way. Everybody's sort of doing favors for other people because they collect favors. And one of the things that Zukov is really good at is he's resourceful. He like he'll save food, he'll find scraps of things, he'll save things, and he'll put it in the sawdust inside his mattress and he'll save it for later. And that allows him to have something to look forward to in life. There's a passage where he says that the people, one of the things that happens when they get there is that people go so hungry that people will line up like in the canteen by the trash or to help out the cooks when they're throwing away food. And when they're being given their trays, they have like 5 minutes to eat. All their meals, they have like 5 minutes. But when they're throwing away their trays, if there's still scraps of food, a lot of people will inevitably end up like licking the trays or licking the plates of the food because they want the extra morsels. But it says that the lifers, the people who've been there a long time, will tell them, don't do that because those people will never make it. They'll get syphilis from licking the plates, or they're just dehumanized to the point of being animals, and they'll do anything to survive, but they will not survive. He says that he talks about snitches a lot, and they're always afraid of snitches. But like consider that like a third of the people in the Soviet Union were snitches. I mean, think about now, right? Think about society we live in now. Think about the internet or anywhere or real life, right? Like 50% of people are just miserable snitches. And he says that they're afraid of those people because they always have the ear of the guards. On the other hand, those people will also wake up with their throat cut. So there's a justice, right? Let's see. He talks about how like there's one guy who, when even though he only has 5 minutes, when he gets hot food, like you can get hot food there, and when they get hot food, they like that means the world to them because the food, they'll get something, and like they go through seasons of what kind of food it is. Like in the summer, it's like carrots, and it's like in the gruel. And then other times, they'll have like, nettles or whatever. But like, as long as it's hot, and there's one guy who will like savor he'll like drink he'll like eat his soup or whatever. And he'll savor every single bite because that gives him dignity. It gives him a sense of like being a human being. Whereas the temptation is just to slop it all down as quickly as possible. And he says like a lot of people do that, and that's fine, but you have to savor the little moments because that's what they live for, right? There's one of the things that is noticeably absent for most of the book, obviously, is religion. But there are religious passages, and there is a religious character in the book. And weirdly, he's a Baptist. They refer to him as a Baptist. It says the Baptist was reading the Gospels, not just to himself, but almost aloud. Maybe this was for Shukov's benefit. Those Baptists love to spread a little propaganda, he says. But let none of you suffer as a murderer or as a thief or as an evildoer or as a busybody in other men's matters. Yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. One great thing about Aloyshka was he was so clever at hiding this book in a hole in the wall that it hadn't been found on any of the searches. Now, not only does this guy have a Bible, I think the guy has put together the Bible himself. He's remembered it. It's from memory, and he's written it down on these pages, and he hides it in the wall. Now, obviously, if they find it, they're going to destroy it, and they'll probably destroy him. But the guy does it anyway, and he's one of the glimmers of hope in this book because he has hope. He has something. He transcends his prison experience because he has a greater life, right? He has hope and he has a greater life. And even though he suffers, he's suffering for God. And we'll get to that at the end. But throughout the rest of the book, there's a noticeable absence of religion because of where they are and because of the rules and because of some of these characters. But you can't help but notice that like the stoicism that's displayed, if only these people had religion, if they were able to be as stoic as they are, right, and pray. And we're going to talk about one of the passages dealing with praying. On page 35, this says, they said even the commandant was scared of Volkovoy, let alone the prisoners and warders. Not for nothing was he called Volkovoy, and he always looked at you like a wolf. He was dark and tall and scowling and always dashing around. He'd come at you from behind the corner of the barracks, shouting, "What's going on here?" You couldn't keep out of his way. In the early days, he carried a whip of braided leather as long as his arm. They said he beat people with it, and he'd sneak up behind someone during the evening roll call and let him have it in the neck with his whip. "Get back into line, you scum." Everybody would back away from him. The fellow he'd whipped would take hold of his neck and wipe off the blood and keep his trap shut so as not to get shoved in the cooler on top of it. Now, for some reason or other, he'd stop going around with the whip. Well, he doesn't need to go around with the whip. See, these guys don't even need to go around with a whip or a gun or a blade because it's just the thought of it that has tempered their minds, right, to be aware of this ever-present whip. Once they are whipped once they are beaten or whipped or stabbed one time or seen it happen to somebody else, it's a form of mind control, right? They're like dogs. It means that they're always afraid of the violence at hand, even though these are hard people, right? Let's see. I want to talk to you about one of the passages dealing with. There's an infirmary. Some things are so funny in this. Like Zhukov is, when he wakes up, like he wants to get to the infirmary. And there's an you guys, there's an infirmary in this. There's a hairdresser, not a hairdresser. There's a barber, essentially. A barber. I think he refers to it as a hairdresser, which is weird. But there's a barber. There's an infirmary. There's a canteen. There's all these like amenities. Now they're not like real amenities. And what's the infirmary going to do? But the infirmary can let two people a night stay back from work the next day. And I guess the point of that is that you would think that they would work everyone to death, and who cares about their fitness or their health. But the point is that in a way it's even worse because they're trying to keep them healthy so that they can work their slave labor the next day. And so it's like a temporary respite from the hell that they go through the next day. But nevertheless, Zhukov says he dreams of being sick, where he can stay sick in bed all week, and he'll only get a little bit of soup, but at least he'll be in bed all week. It's almost they're almost like school kids, right? He says, let's see. This is they get letters, they get packages and letters from home, which again is crazy. Who would have thought that they would get that? Some of the guys get constant packages and letters. That's where they get their tobacco. That's where they get their tobacco. And of course, they're always looking for tobacco. One of the guys, there's a scene where one of the guys is going through the spittoons, looking for, cigarette butts. And they have these little filters they put on them, right? So they don't get syphilis. But a lot of times when they're out, they won't smoke. They won't smoke because, of course, they don't want anybody to know that they have tobacco. They talk about knives and blades and how they get searched constantly. And it says that their uniforms, like the prison uniforms, aren't made with pockets, obviously. And it says that they're always getting searched, especially the linings of their coats and their hats and stuff, and their mittens. Of course, if you go without mittens in this place, like you're dead. It's like minus 20 to minus 40 degrees. They have to have mittens outside. They have to have gloves, and they're wrapped up. But they're not worried about like blades and shanks and knives so much. In fact, they don't really make those there. He says that they usually find them when they're coming in. People are bringing blades into the gulag. They're not really making them there or carrying them around. There's not much they can do, especially not against the guards. I mean, the guards are like floating over them. And they can be extremely brutal. They can, shoot you for getting out of line. But they can also be kind. So it's sort of a symbiotic system here in a way. Um, let's see. The thing Zhukov didn't get at all was what his wife wrote about how not a single new member had come to the kolkhots since the war. All the youngsters were getting out as best they could to factories and towns or the peat fields. Half the kolkhozniks had not come back after the war, and those who had wouldn't have anything to do with the kolkhos. They lived there but earned their money somewhere else. The only men in the kolkhots were the gang boss, Zakhar Vasilyevich, and the carpenter, Tikhon, who was 84, had married not long ago, and even had children already. The real work of the kolkhots was done by the same women who'd been there since the start in 1930. The thing Zhukov just couldn't figure out was that these people living on the farm but working outside. Zhukov had seen how it was on both individual and collective farms, but the idea of peasants not working in their own village, that he just couldn't take. Did they go off to seasonal work or something? And what did they do about getting the hay in? His wife had told him they'd given up seasonal work a long time ago. They didn't do any carpentry anymore, a thing their village was known for everywhere, and they didn't weave baskets anymore. Who wanted that sort of thing nowadays? Now, why am I reading this to you? Because even though this seems like a very bland and matter-of-fact passage, it's pretty significant because it speaks to the fact that, number one, this is happening in the present tense, right? This is Zhukov or Ivan Denisovich reading a letter from his wife or remembering a letter from his wife, and everything that he's recalling and reading is matter of fact and concrete because it's the concrete details that he can focus on that let him know he's still alive. It also lets him know that there's a life outside of where he is. Now, it's not so much detail that he's in pain about it. He doesn't get any details about like, oh, your daughter is growing up and she misses you so much. And, one day you'll come back, which is what you would think it would be because melodrama, because movies, because, we get this idea of like, oh, that's what's going to inspire these prisoners in the gulag to live another day. But that's not at all what will inspire them. In fact, that will not inspire them because it will only make them miss the fact that they will never be there again. Because the thought of the prisoners here is they will never make it outside. They probably won't even make it past the day. So they live day to day. So just focusing on concrete details takes their mind off of the things that they're doing now, but still lets them be grounded in reality. I thought that was a pretty powerful detail. That's one of the reasons why this is a great book, right? It's stripped of sentimentality. This says, let's see. Oh, this is a description of a guy called Kilgas, right? Hey, what's up? West Lexicon Media, ACR. We gave a big shout out to you earlier, homeboy. Everybody go over to West Lexicon Media on YouTube and of course, on Instagram. Follow him on Instagram. Love your edits. I've been loving your edits recently, homie. They're amazing. I honestly, I really don't know how you do it. I just have no idea. I mean, that's just so beyond like my own. I can't, it's hard for me to comprehend how you, how you're able to throw together videos like that. I think it's really amazing. So everybody check out his edits, and check out his videos and check out the content. Everybody should check out ACR, Alternate Current Radio's content, of course, because we love you guys. Okay, so let's keep going here. Kilgas is about a guy named Kilgas. Kilgas couldn't say a word without making a joke. The whole gang liked him for this, and the way all the Latvians in the camp looked up to him. But of course, Kilgas ate pretty good with his 2 packages a month. He looked kind of healthy, just like he wasn't in a camp at all. It was easy for him to make jokes. Now, look, that passage is so brilliant because if you're a writer, all right, if you've ever tried to write or you took a creative writing class, or you just read about writers, imagine that, what it takes to write a good story. Think of it like in the teenage version of yourself, right? Where you're writing about, the death of your grandmother or something. And, everything's emotional and you're trying to spill your guts, but that's more of a diary, right? And of course, are you going to read your own diary entry back to yourself? Probably not, because you've already felt the emotion that you're trying to capture. So do it like Ezra Pound does it, or you do it like Solzhenitsyn does it, which is you have some time, you have some distance, and you have some space. You keep writing those things, but you don't show them to other people and you don't publish them because you need to be able to synthesize those things to temper them like steel into something that's concrete and hard with tactile details because you can show the reader. You don't have to tell the reader. Solzhenitsyn here doesn't have to tell the reader what to think. He doesn't have to tell us, oh, we survived because the humor made us remember, that we're human beings and it was funny. Those are all things that we think naturally. All he has to do is show us in monosyllabic words, right? The word Latvian is trisyllabic, right? But the rest of it is pretty basic in simple sentences, and he's just giving us simple details and something to which everyone can relate. There's a dude, his name's Kilgos. He's funny. He's a jokester. He also gets packages twice a month, so he lives well, and he makes it. And that's it. That's all he says, right? Speaking of the Latvians, there are a number of great details. Consider when this book was published, right, that the average person, the average American especially, had no idea about gulags. They didn't know anything about Soviet prison camps. They may not have even known they existed, but they certainly didn't know any details. They didn't know what they were like. And they didn't probably know any details about like various ethnicities or Eastern Europeans. But this book is pretty enlightening in that sense because we get clear demarcations and differences amongst members of the various Soviet Socialist Republic, right? For instance, when he describes the Estonians, there's this pretty, poignant passage about how like there are these two Estonian guys, and they're like nice looking, they look like they're like good looking. They look like human beings, but they also look hard. And how they're best friends. They're always together. They didn't know each other when they came into camp, but somehow they stuck together and they do everything together. And the guards, interestingly, will not separate them. And you ask yourself, why would you do that? Because the whole point is dehumanization, right? You're dehumanizing these people. But actually, the dehumanization, again, sort of folds back onto itself because the guards know that you can dehumanize these guys enough by putting them in this prison camp and making them do this slave labor and barely feeding them and taking away their humanity. But if you take it away too much, you won't get out of it what you want, which is the construction of the power company or the railroad. So they let these guys hang out together and protect each other. And it also says that Zhukov says he'd never known an Estonian that like he didn't like, right? Which is a sort of it's a blanket statement about a particular, ethnic group. Oh yeah, sister, if you're still watching, I'm wearing your shirt that you gave me, right? Everybody, this is a Mississippi Aquarium. Shouts out to my sister, Mississippi Aquarium. It's my favorite shirt. So he says, you might well ask why a prisoner worked so hard for 10 years in a camp. This is page 66 of the book here. Why didn't they say to hell with it and drag their feet all day long to the night, which was theirs? But it wasn't so simple, is what I've been saying. That's why they dream up these gangs. It wasn't like gangs outside where every fellow got paid separately. In the camps, they had these gangs to make the prisoners keep each other on their toes. So the fellows at the top didn't have to worry. It was like this. Either you all got something extra or you all starved. You're not pulling your weight, you swine, and I've got to go hungry because of you. You work, you bastard. But when a really tough job came along, like now, you couldn't sit on your hands. Like it or not, you had to get a move on. Either they made the place warm within 2 hours or they'd all be fucking well dead. Pavlo had come with the tools already. All they had to do was pick out what they needed, and he also brought some pipes. True, there was nothing to fit them with, but there was a hammer and a small hatchet. They do it somehow. See, you get that, you guys? This is brilliant. I think that's one of the most important passages in the book. It's such a small passage, but it tells you everything you need to know about their system. Right? That's all they need. It's unnecessary for them to have guards watching over them all the time because they don't need that. All they need to do is not feed them enough, right? And they will take care of each other, or they will kill each other off. I meant to mention earlier with the blizzard, right? So one thing is the prisoners, there are all these passages about blizzards, and they say that Zhukov says, or the speaker says about Zhukov that, like, he awaits the thermometer. They check the thermometer, but then when they go up to check there's this funny thing about when they go up to check the thermometer, they blow on it, right, or they breathe on it to try and get it going because it's frozen, and then they're like, listen, man, it doesn't matter what you do. The thermometer's broken anyway, and they do that on purpose. So it's funny that these guys notice within their own world and their own system that, like, everything that the state makes is put there to hurt them, and that they don't trust any of the equipment. There's another scene where they're working outside and they say, "Oh, it's noon," and then a guy says, "How do you know that?" And he says he looks up in the sky and says, "Well, the sun is highest in the sky, so it's noon." And then the other guy says, "Nah, man, it's bullshit. They changed that. It's 1 o'clock. They made it so that when the sun is highest, it's 1 o'clock. It's not noon." And he said, "What do you mean they changed it?" And he's like, "The state changed it. Accept it, right? If they say it's 1 o'clock and it's not noon, it's 1 o'clock. You got to live by that rule." So they're like, "Okay, well, whatever." But time doesn't even make a difference to them anyway. And again, one of the ironies of the book is that the days pass so fast, but the years never pass. They never come. Because, like I said in the beginning, even when the years do come, they just add on more. They just add on more, right? The blizzard. Oh, back to the blizzard. It snowed the way that it snows, even though they're in Kazakhstan. The gulags are like all across the Soviet Union and the satellite states. We think of gulags mainly as being in, like, Siberia, right? And they were in Siberia, but his one in particular is in Kazakhstan, and Yekshimesh, right? Jekwi. um, but he says the snow is more of like a fine misty snow, and it snows, but not that much. But when there's a blizzard, he says it becomes a heavy snow, and they don't have to go out and work because it's a good thing. So it's good and bad. It's good because the guys in the camp don't have to leave for the day and they don't have to work, right? But it also means that they're going to miss rations or whatever, and it's bad uh, it, there's good and bad things, like, because they're also going to freeze in the camp, right? So they won't have to work, they'll also freeze. And the guards know that if the reason they don't go out in the blizzard is because it actually keeps the prisoners there. Because if they go out in the snow, that in the blizzard, that's when prisoners will try to escape. Although the speaker here says that Zhukov knows that, like, when there's a heavy blizzard, they have to walk with ropes between them because they can't even see a foot in front of them. And the times when people have tried to escape and they've gotten over the fences, it was during a blizzard, but they always found them dead and frozen. Like, there's no way they're so far away from anything, and they can't see anything, and there's no food, and there's just no possible way they can survive. He says that, like, when there's not a blizzard, they can't possibly escape because there's guards like, on the perimeter of the camp. The fences and the walls are so high and the guards are armed, and they're like everywhere, and they have searchlights, and they would never escape. And in fact, one of the ironies is that they want to work because the working keeps them warm, right? It's like when they're out on the steppe and they have to, like, build this power station or whatever, and the ground is frozen, and they're like, "Okay, but why don't you build a fire over the ground so you can soften up the ground so you can dig the hole?" Well, there's good and bad things, right? If they do that, then it's like a waste of time and they're not building what they're supposed to. But they have to do it because they have to dig the hole, right? And they'll get warm. They'll get warm temporarily, but they'll actually lose warmth because they're waiting for the ground to thaw from the fire, and they're not working. And the fire is not warm enough to actually keep them warm. The only thing that keeps them warm is the actual working itself. So they're incentivized to work because it's so cold. It says on page 73, it was clear, and by the sun, it was almost noon. Yeah, it was a funny thing how time flew when you were working. He was always struck by how fast the days went in camp. You didn't have time to turn around, but the end of your sentence never seemed to be any closer. Let's see. I'm just going through some highlighted passages here. He says, all I know is, on page 76, all I know is I've done 8 of mine, that's for sure. So you just went on living like this with your eyes on the ground, and you had no time to think about how you got in and when you get out. Yes, and thank you just quickly, thank you everybody for being here. Make sure, you guys, that you please hit the like button on the video. Helps us with the algorithm. Please leave a comment below because, again, that helps us with the algorithm. The more comments we get, share the stream. Share it in your Instagram. Share it on your Facebooks. Share it in Twitter. Share it by word of mouth. Really appreciate it. We're at like 520 subs or something. We're trying to get up to 1,000. And the next stream we're going to do is going to be the 10,000 view fun party stream. I'm probably going to talk again in that next one about Bret Easton Ellis, author of American Psycho, and his Lunar Park, which probably not many people have read, but it's my favorite Bret Easton Ellis. Really brilliant book. But we're going to do a fun stream. So also, please, if you want to support me, thank you to the mods who have dropped the links in the chat, and you can support me in Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo. And especially if you drop a Venmo or Cash App, then you can super chat, and I can get your message and read it online. If you want to, thank you, Ellie, for dropping those links. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Once we get to 1,000, then we can enable our YouTube super chat. So that'll be cool. So yeah, think about supporting me. I really appreciate y'all. Let's see. On page 94, he says 93 and 94. Oh, there's a scene where there's so much humanity within the camp. Like, you think that they would never be allowed to do anything, right? But there are all these scenes where they're allowed to do, paint and write. We already saw the scene with the Baptist in the camp who, has made a Bible and he's reading and he prays. And then there's other people who paint. One of the activities they do is they make these rugs, and he says they're super popular in the Soviet Union. Like, everybody has them. Basically, all they do is they get a stencil and they put it on a rug and they just paint it. But like, all the guards have them. They get favors from them, and then when they're on the outside, they're sold. I mean, everybody in the Soviet Union has one. They even make Oriental rugs. And there's a scene where these two guys are like talking, and it says, "You're wrong, pal," Caesar was saying, and he was trying not to be too hard on him. "One must say, in all objectivity, that Eisenstein is a genius. Now, isn't Ivan the Terrible a work of genius? The Oprichniki, dancing in mass, the scene in the cathedral, all show off," K123 snapped. He was holding his spoon in front of his mouth. "Too much art is no art at all, like candy instead of bread. And the politics of it is utterly vile, a vindication of a one-man tyranny, an insult to the memory of 3 generations of Russian intellectuals." He ate his mush, but there was no taste in his mouth. It was wasted on him. "But what other treatment of the subject would have been let through?" "Ha! Let through, you say? Then don't call him a genius. Call him a toady. Say he carried out orders like a dog. A genius doesn't adapt his treatment to the taste of tyrants." Well, that's true, but also sort of ironic, right? I mean, Solzhenitsyn, as far as we know, was no toady, right, to the Russian state. Who knows? He may have been. And, of course, I can't speak to Solzhenitsyn or any like CIA ties that he may have had. I mean, he did, I don't know, did he fully defect? I mean, he did live in Maine for a while, right, when he was kicked out of the Soviet Union. So I would think, remember Jay's talks on Yuri Bezmenov, right? And it's like these guys defect, but you can't defect, especially as like an intelligence officer. You can't defect from the Soviet Union into the American state without being co-opted or like a cutout for the American intelligence state or for the global intelligence apparatus, right? Remember that occurs in The Good Shepherd. Remember that movie, The Good Shepherd, where the guy defects, but it turns out that he's Ulysses, right? And then he's the fake Ulysses. Then the other guy jumps out the window. Anyway, I can't speak to whether Solzhenitsyn was party to any of that. Maybe he was the real deal. I don't know. Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Also, you guys, you can email me. You can email me at, I'm going to say my email address. Don't put it in the chat. It's madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com. And that offer stands. I haven't really talked about that much because it was actually DPH's offer for his channel. I don't want to just go ahead and outright steal it, right? But it was a good idea, right? Which is that, yo, if you got something you want me to cover, you got a book you want me to cover, you want something you want me to analyze on here and give you a good hour or 2 hours of an analysis, an in-depth analysis, and give you my take on a book, one you may not agree with. But I'm going to give you my take and my opinion on the book. Then drop me $100 and put it in and write me an email at madmaximalism, MADMAXXIMALISM, madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com. And I will read the book and I'll give you 2 hours of my time and do it for everybody and make sure I give you big shouts out if you're interested in that. I think that'd be cool. Crispy says the Da Vinci Code. Crispy, listen, you drop me 100. You drop me €100, okay? And I will do that for you, homeboy. Or we could do Holy Blood of the Holy Grail, right? Which Dan Brown stole. I read that book when I was like 20. Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. Anyway, right, the Rosalind. Okay, so let's keep going here. Just a couple more passages that I thought were pretty interesting. Page 114. In Zhukov's home village, there were no stone houses, only wood shacks, and the school was built of logs too. They got as much wood as they liked from the forest. But now in the camp, he had to do a bricklayer's job. So, okay, he did. Anybody who knew 2 trades could pick up a dozen more just like that. Wow, these guys, I mean, look, think of it. They're in this hellscape, right? But they still manage to pick up trades, to do useful things, and to survive that way. And I love how he says this. But now in the camp, he had to do a bricklayer's job. So, okay, he did. So, okay, comma, he did. That's the sentence. Which is to say, look, man, you know, we had to live. So we kept living, right? LIVIN. Now it hit Zhukov, page 115, what it was all about. He shot a glance at Kilgoss. He'd already caught on. It was a roofing felt. Dare had seen it on the windows. Zhukov wasn't a bit worried about himself. His boss wouldn't give him away, but he was scared for Tyrin. And the boss was like a father to you, but to them he was nothing at all. Up here in the north, they were always slapping on new sentences for goings on like this. God, the way the boss's face twitched all over, the way he threw his trowel on the floor and went over to Dare. Dare looked around. Pavlo was standing there with his shovel up. He hadn't brought it up for nothing. And Senka, deaf as he was, had seen what it was all about, and he came out with his hands on his hips. He was strong as an ox. Dare was blinking. He was worried, and he looked around for a way out. The boss leaned over close to Dare and said in a kind of quiet, but so you could hear it up there, times have changed for scum like you, handing out new sentences. If you say a word, you bloodsucker, you won't be alive much longer. Get it? The boss was shaking all over and he couldn't stop. I love that passage because it shows that sometimes the bosses are afraid of the other prisoners, right? It's not just a one-way street. Let's see. Okay. On page 127 says Zhukov had gotten his breath back now, and he looked up at the sky. The moon had come up full, and it looked all purple. And maybe it was on the wane already. It had been much higher up this time the day before. So he talks about, here's one instance where he talks about the day before, right? But it's a very small instance where he does that. And this is at the end of the day. Remember, this is just one day. It's in the title. Zhukov was so glad they'd gotten off so easy, and he poked the captain in the ribs, sort of kidding him. Captain, tell me what it says in those books you've studied about what happens to the old moon when it goes down. What do you mean? Where does it go? You're just ignorant. It's simply you can't see it. Zhukov shook his head and laughed. But if you can't see it, how do you know it's there? They're talking about the moon. So you think, the captain just looked at him, so you think we get a brand new moon every month? Well, don't we? If people are born every day, why shouldn't there be a brand new moon every 4 weeks? Come off it, the captain spat. I've never met such a dumb sailor in my life. Where do you think the old one goes to? Well, that's what I'm asking you, Zhukov said, and you could see the gap in his teeth. Well, you tell me. Zhukov sighed and said with that funny lisp of his, the old people at home used to say God breaks the old moon up into stars. What ignorance, the captain said and laughed. Never heard of that one before. Do you believe in God then, Zhukov? And why not? Zhukov said. When he thunders up there in the sky, how can you help believe in him? And why does God do that? Do what? Break the moon up into the stars, the captain said. Don't you see? And Zhukov shrugged his shoulders. The stars keep falling down, so you've got to have new ones in their place. Wow. If that's not a metaphor for their life, right? First of all, he's talking about God. He believes in God. They have hope in this place. Yes? And although they're talking about this sort of Gnostic idea of the moon breaking up and this sort of Crowleyan idea of the moon and every man and woman is a star, there is some beauty here, right? And the metaphor is obviously that although, the moon is to the person, the moon goes up and then it's destroyed the next day, and then there's a new moon, but it's the same moon. So he's saying here that like he is the moon, right? And he's not a sun. He's not shining like the sun, but he is catching a reflection of heat. Just like he's catching a reflection of heat from he gets heat wherever he can. He gets light wherever he can in this place. Yeah. Whenever there's a fire, like he barely gets warm. He gets some light. Just like the moon is up very briefly, right? And it doesn't emit light, but it sort of reflects light. These prisoners reflect light to one another. And the moon goes up, and Zhukov isn't afraid. He doesn't know whether the moon will come up again the next day, just like he himself doesn't know whether he is going to come up the next day. He doesn't know if his number's going to be called. He doesn't know if he'll be killed. He doesn't even know if he'll wake up from sleep. They don't even know if they're going to wake up out of freezing to death, right? But nevertheless, it'll happen for someone, and life goes on, he says. What a brilliant and beautiful passage, right? In the, a real metaphysical passage of, I don't know if it's an esoteric passage of like metaphysical beauty right in the middle of this book, right? Which sort of slips by, I think, to the average reader. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's a famous passage and I don't know it. Like I said, I haven't read the literary criticism of this book, so I'm just getting my own takes on it. On page 154, he says, all the same, every time anybody in his gang or in his part of the barracks got a package, and this was nearly every day, he felt a kind of pang inside because it wasn't him. And he thought he told his wife she must never send him anything, even for Easter. And he never went to that post with the list on it, unless it was to take a look for some other guy who was well off. Still, he sometimes had the crazy idea somebody might run up to him one day and say, Zhukov, what are you waiting for? You've got a package. But nobody ever did. And he thought about his home village of Temgenyovo and the wooden shack where they lived. Here he was on the go from reveille to lights out, and there was no time for daydreaming. But Zhukov had only one thing to hope for. He might still make it to the mess hall with the rest of his gang in time to eat his gruel before it got cold. It didn't do you half as much good if it was cold. Right? He's only got one thing to live for. He doesn't live for his wife on the outside. He doesn't live for the packages. He doesn't live thinking that he'll ever see home again. He lives for the fact that he will get to the canteen with his gang, with his friends, and that the food will be warm. That's it. On page 169, he began to eat. He started with the watery stuff on the top and drank it right down. The warmth went through his body and his insides were sort of quivering, waiting for that gruel to come down. It was great, he says. This was what a prisoner lived for. This one little moment. Zhukov didn't have a grudge in the world now about how long his sentence was, about how long their day was, about that Sunday they wouldn't get. All he thought now was, we'll get through. We'll get through it all. And God grant it all come to an end. I love the fact that he said that he mentions God there, right? Yes. Cheers out there to everybody with my hot GMO drinks. Kristen's been telling me, listen, you can't be drinking all these, going to shut down your kidneys. Well, all I'm thinking about is getting to that mess hall and that gruel. Right? FEMA camp on the way. I'll see everybody there. It says, page 181, Fetyukov came through the barracks and he was crying. He was all hunched up and there was blood on his lips. So he must have gotten beat up again for trying to scrounge somebody's bowl. He went past the whole gang, didn't look at anybody, and didn't bother hiding his tears. He climbed up to his bunk and dug his face in his mattress. You couldn't help feeling sorry for him if you thought about it. He'd never live out his time in the camp. He just didn't know how to do things right. Again, no sentimentality. He does say he couldn't help feeling sorry for him, but that's the only time that really occurs in the book. Right? And it's also the only time where, one of the only times where we see, again, we don't even see the actual brutality here. We just see the result of the brutality. Kind of like we see the moon, right, as a result, right? We see everything as a result. We see everything through reflection in this. We rarely see what we always thought to be or what I always thought was going to be in this book, which was the stark brutality of the guards, like it occurs in Elie Wiesel's Night, right, or in Schindler's List or something. Now, that's not to say that doesn't happen here in this world. It's just to say that these characters they got to live their lives, and if they focus on it too much and they suffer, especially if they suffer too openly, they will never make it, right? Let's see. Page 195. But Zhukov had such a good day, he didn't even feel like sleeping. He felt so great. Wow. Right? You got to admire this guy. He didn't even feel like sleeping. He had a great day. This was a great day to him. Number one, he lived. Right? And I'm not going to say that there's a lesson we can take from this, right, to apply to our lives. I don't think that there's a moral to take from it. But I do think it is that the worldview here is one, essentially, that's saying, look, man, shit can be really bad. It can be a whole lot worse. But no matter how bad it is, you got to keep living. Right? You got to keep living. And that human beings can get through pretty much anything. He says, and that was that, the end of another day. Thank God, he said. Okay, now here's one of the key passages. This was a striking passage because I didn't know whether I was going to get to anything like this. But here we go at the end of the book on page 195. Zhukov lay down with his head to the window, and Aloyshka was on the other side of the bunk with his head the other way so he got the light from the bulb. He was reading the Gospels again. Remember, Aloyshka was the Baptist who was reading the Gospels at the beginning of the book. Aloyshka heard Zhukov thank the Lord, because remember, he just said, thank God. He thanked the Lord, and he turned to him, look here, Ivan Denisovich, your soul wants to pray to God, so why don't you let it have its way? Zhukov looked at Aloyshka, and his eyes were narrow. They had a light in them, and they were like two candles, and he sighed. I'll tell you why, Aloyshka, because all these prayers are like the complaints we send in to the higher-ups. Either they don't get there, or they come back to you marked rejected. Either there was nothing or it was rejected. The trouble is, Ivan Denisovich, you don't pray hard enough, and that's why your prayers don't work out. You must pray unceasing. And if you have faith and tell the mountain to move, it will move. Zhukov grinned and made himself another cigarette. He got a light from one of the Estonians. Don't give me that, Aloyshka. I've never seen a mountain move. Come to think of it, I've never seen a mountain either. And when you and all your Baptists prayed down there in the Caucasus, did you ever see a mountain move? Poor fellows. All they did was pray to God, and there they were. And were they in anybody's way? They all got 25 years because that's how it was now. 25 years for everybody. But we didn't pray for that, Ivan Denisovich, Aloyshka said. And he came up close to Zhukov with his Gospels, right up to his face. The only thing of this earth the Lord has ordered us to pray for is our daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. Right? That's it. And do they get their daily bread? They get their daily bread. They get their daily bread. That's what they pray for, and they got it. That's one of the main things in the book. They get their daily bread. That's what keeps them going. Half of the book is about the happiness that he feels in his literal daily bread, right? In fact, right after this, Zhukov goes back and finds little morsels of bread in his mattress, hidden it that he hid in the sawdust in his mattress, right? And he finds his bread. Now, obviously, I know we're not talking about literal. He here is talking about his literal daily bread, right? But obviously we're talking about the spiritual bread, right? But in this prison, in this world that they're in, that's how they survive, is their literal daily bread, right? And he says, Ivan Denisovich, you mustn't pray for somebody to send you a package or for an extra helping of gruel. Things that people set store by are base in the sight of the Lord. You must pray for the things the spirits of the Lord will take evil things from our hearts. He said later on, Ivan says, I'm not against God. Understand? I believe in God, all right. But what I don't believe in is heaven and hell. Who do you think we are giving us all that stuff about heaven and hell? That's the thing I can't take. Aloyshka says, you mustn't pray for that. Aloyshka was horror struck. What do you want your freedom for? What faith you have left will be choked in thorns. What faith you rejoice that you are in prison. Here you can think of your soul. Paul the apostle said, what mean you to weep and to break my heart? For I am ready not to be bound only, but also to die for the name of the Lord Jesus. Shukov looked up at the ceiling and said nothing. He didn't know any longer himself whether he wanted freedom or not. Right? Right, you guys? Based passage at the end, right? We get a good guy. Yeah, we get a good guy in here. I'm not saying, you think that these passages, I kind of go into this book thinking, okay, yeah, Solzhenitsyn is a great guy and it's, whatever. And, we're going to get this book. It's about the human condition, all this stuff, but he's going to turn out to be an atheist, right? But then you get a passage like this, and it's at the climax. This is the climax of the book. This is the culmination of the book, right? And it shows you that their suffering is not only suffering in terms of their literal human suffering, right? We see that there are noble characters, right? There are noble characters who realize that their suffering is for something greater, and they don't whine about it. Yeah? They get on with life and they live. Surprise, 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 right? Surprise ending, right? Surprise ending. There's a guy who believes in God in this, and he gives life, right? He brings life to their world, to their hell world, and to these other people. Yeah. There's a guy who has salvation. They talk about salvation in this. Crazy, right? Crazy. I did not expect that in this book. And that's pretty much the book. The book ends. He goes to sleep. That's it. That's the end of the day. He made it. He made it. He lived, right? He woke up. He worked. And then he ate and he prayed. He thanked God. And then he went to sleep. And that's it. That's the book. And that book, at least as far as the lore goes, right? That book helped bring down the Soviet Union, which is what they say. Now, I don't know what to think about that, right? But what I do think is that it's a powerful book, and you can tell that the state hated this. Yeah, if not just for the exposure of the, what life is like in such a matter-of-fact way. In a way, if the book had been, sentimental and, full of sort of, I don't know, prosaic passages about, emotion and sentimentality, then people maybe they would have seen through it as propaganda or something. I don't know. But because it's so matter of fact, because it's just a statement of life and how things are in this camp, and everything else is left to for you to infer. Maybe that's why it was so successful. And this also shows you that, right? Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Henry, the pen. is mightier than the sword, right? The war of ideas, the info war and the war of ideas is powerful. Yes, it is extremely powerful, and people can be swayed by the truth. So I don't know, hopeful book. I thought it was hopeful. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed reading it. It's an easy read. And it was a surprise read to me. I just decided at sort of the last minute, like a lot of these books. But again, this one was different for me because I didn't. This is a book that I hadn't read before. I kind of avoided it purposefully. Like I said, I'd done with Moby Dick, and like I said before, I don't really. I usually don't read fiction, for fun. But we've been doing a lot of fiction lately, also because I like to talk about fiction, and I've read quite a lot of fiction. But I tend to avoid it, and also because we're a literary stream, and we're not really doing, we're not doing history here. We're not, focusing on. We talk about like geopolitics, but that's not really our purview to talk about it specifically. We're not doing, we're not trying to do Jay's globalist book series because he's done it, right? That's if you want to see that, go to Jay's analysis, right? You can't get better than that. So we're trying to do our little niche here, talking about literature, and this gives us a window, an insight into truth. Always thought that was weird. Connery, like 10 years older than Harrison, playing his dad. Yeah, but ain't that the way it always is, right? I made you, brush your teeth, wash behind your ears, right? I just picked up this book, which I'm probably going to read next. I'm not going to cover it here, but I'm going to read it. I just picked up this book, which is Gulag. So I'm going to read this for myself, just to brush up on the history of the gulags. If I can find ever my copy of Gulag Archipelago, that would be nice. Got that old, I think it's a first edition hardback red copy of the Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn. And of course, again, next time we'll be reading Bret Easton Ellis's Lunar Park. I actually can't wait to cover this book with you guys because this is going to be fun. And this is a book that probably not a lot of people have read. It came out when I was, I think I was at university when it came out. Let's see, it was published in 2005. I was in grad school. And I've got Bret Easton Ellis's Less Than Zero. Look at this copy of Less Than Zero that I have. Right, James Spader. Got old Bob right there. But I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to cover that here, and I'm not going to cover Rules of Attraction. Jay just mentioned Rules of Attraction recently. I'm not going to cover American Psycho. I actually prefer the movie American Psycho to the book. One instance of a movie I think is better than the book. At least it's different. Lunar Park, though, is a meta story about Bret Easton Ellis himself, sort of confronting his DID and a spectral demon in Los Angeles. And so that's going to be an interesting and a fun book to read or to cover with you guys. So that'll be next. Again, next we're going to have we'll do Dr. Seuss for us slow boys out here. Did I read his nonfiction book? No, I haven't. I haven't read Glamorama. And I haven't read White. And I was really into, Bret Easton Ellis's fiction for a while. And then I read The Goldfinch. If you guys haven't read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, shouts out to Mississippi, right? From Mississippi. I haven't seen the movie The Goldfinch because I don't want to watch it and ruin my vision of the story, because I actually really loved the book. I thought it was a brilliant book, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I really like that. So, but I'm not gonna. There's a Russian guy in that, right? Oh, it was a Russian kid. His friend is Russian, and I haven't read Bright Lights, Big City. Right? Remember, they were all part of that group at that college in Vermont. Catch that blasted goldfish. Yeah, that's sort of what it's about. um, let's see. Did we get any other super chats in here? Kristen Jr. Kristen says, okay. All right. Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate you. So, you guys, yes. If you got any more super chats you want to throw my way, really appreciate you. Really appreciate your support for the channel. Again, thank you to everybody who supported me. Thank you to my sister out there. I love you. Thank you for the big support. Thank you to my mom out there. Thank you for the big support. Thank you to TGF for the huge support in the past and tonight. Thank you to Derek. Let's see, James Lorenz. Oh, shouts out to James Lorenz who supported me earlier today, and he said this is for the Salty stream. Really appreciate you, homeboy. Shouts out to everybody who supported me out there, and you can donate at any time so I can keep doing the streams. I'm going to keep doing them anyway. I love doing it. It's really fun, but the support really helps me keep going, and got that microphone on the way, so that'll be good. And we got big things coming in the future, you guys. I think we're going to keep building and going up. Also promise to I'm going to keep doing the streams a little bit more frequently. Remember, we started off doing like one a night, and we were really going. And then, of course, life happens, things happen. And then we've been doing about 2 or 3 a week. We've done some big interviews with our homies at ACR and Tristan at Primal Edge Health and David Patrick Harry at Church of the Eternal Logos. So we're going to keep doing those. Okay. Ooh, look at this. We got a $5 super chat from Devin Allman. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Thank you for that $5 super chat via PayPal. Really appreciate you. Thank you for supporting me, homie. And again, if you got any ideas, thank you to everybody who's given ideas in the comments. I always see you guys' comments. I really appreciate it. People have got some really great comments. And of course, shouts out to Thomas Henderson, who is one of our high IQ homies out there, who's always got really good takes. And also for a lot of times when I like misspeak or when I, ask a question or like, I forget the name of something, and Thomas Henderson will always set me straight or help me out with a new interpretation. Really appreciate you out there, Thomas. So thank you to everybody. And I guess that's it for tonight. I hope everybody has a great week. Man, we're in springtime now. We're getting into full-time summer, you guys. We started off in the dead of winter in February, right? We've been going for 3 months now. And I think we're making some really great progress. We're doing real well out here, right? We're doing really well. We're doing real good out here, folks. We're going to keep rolling. So this is fun, and I love seeing you guys, and that's about all I got. So I will talk to you guys in a couple days, and when we hit that 10K views, especially, we're going to go up. So please keep sharing my stream. Thanks for everybody who's watching. Thanks to everybody who's lurking. Thanks to everybody who is watching later. I'm getting tons of views later on after the live stream, so really appreciate it. Yep, Natesky. Thanks. Shouts out to my homeboy Natesky, high IQ Natesky. Everybody sub to Natesky and look at his beautiful art on Instagram. Nate Armstrong. Check out his beautiful art on Instagram. He is amazing. He's very talented. So thank you to everybody. Okay, you guys, that's about all I got. I will see y'all later. Peace.